Is that a microphone or what is that?
It's a microphone, yeah, because we got video going there. So yeah, so it should be recording. Hi, my name is Joy. It was funnier, yes, that's true. So Joy Zhang put together an amazing presentation for us today, but sadly, she could not be here in person. So I'm stepping in to kind of help run through it together. But I wanted to first of all just start by thanking Joy for all of her hard work putting this together. Let me unfreeze the projector. There. That's why that joke didn't kill. So also, I wanted to note, Joy's provided a Discord link to Bloop, which is the startup that she works on, as well as her Twitter and email. So at any point as you're hacking this week, if you have questions, you want to reach out to Joy directly, she'd be very, very happy to help any of you out. So wanted to make sure you had a moment to kind of take that down, save it, take a photo of it, everything, so that you can communicate with her directly as well outside of this. So definitely very, very grateful. And I can put this up again at the end if anybody doesn't get it now, so that we can make sure that you can get in contact. So the title of this presentation is Truths, Lies, and Ruin in Design Research. And the reason I'm also really personally excited about this is because the process of developing a product is hard, it's difficult, it's tricky. And we like to talk a lot about research and design thinking and how you can extract insights from your users. But the way that most of us do it isn't necessarily the way that's going to give us the answers we need as designers to generate the right tools and the right outcomes. It's a pretty tricky thing to get right, but there's some tips that can help you with doing that. So today, you're going to learn about truth, lies, and ruin. Truth, finding the right problem to solve and understand the problem in reality. So scoping, helping to scope that problem. Lies, avoiding bad data that will send you in the wrong direction as you're trying to come up with a product. Making sure that you're not building for the wrong audience, or that you are getting the feedback that people think you want to hear, but that actually isn't the feedback that you need. And ruin, creating the solution that everyone loves, but that mysteriously doesn't actually work out. So here's why you should actually care. Whether you're a business person or a tech person or design person, whether you're here to win the hackathon and be the best, or just here to learn and use this experience going forward, you need design research as a toolkit. Not even just like for this week, but just in your life. It's helpful to have. And it's helpful to, find a way to get to truth, which fundamentally is like what we want to achieve. And to understand different perspectives and to understand how they kind of flow together to help you build your products. So why do you need design research? Well, better design research leads to clarity, efficiency, and better success. It increases the likelihood of success. Because the world is a diverse place, people have different perspectives, people have different lived experiences, and research allows us to get out of our heads and building just what's right for us and building what's right for everybody. Poor design research, on the other hand, can lead to confusion, wasted resources, and more mistakes. And if you're trying to get a new idea off the ground, you've got limited resources to work with and limited time. You can't afford to waste that time in any way. So let's start with truth. So here's a problem. There is a 70-story building in the heart of the city, and people are complaining that the elevator is way too slow and it's raining to leave the building. So there's a problem. The building is going to lose business. People are going to move out because it's such an irritating thing that the elevator is so slow. Most people in the building go to work at 9 a.m. and leave at 5 p.m. The owner is spending tons of money to market and rent out remaining offices, but word is spreading that the elevator is super slow. Almost everyone is in finance, and poor reviews about office buildings spread like wildfire. So I want you to just think for a minute or two, what could be done here? What could be done here to solve this problem? I'm going to give you just 60 seconds to think about an answer. So, as in what could be done, what could be designed to solve this problem, right? Because the elevator is too slow, which is a real problem in our Seoul office. There's like 2 elevators, and I normally have to wait, I think 3 elevators go by, and then eventually I can get on.
Incentivize the stairs.
Incentivize the stairs, okay.
Yeah, give them funds to fix the elevators.
More funds to fix the elevators, make them faster. You've seen this before. What was that?
The time, so 9 a.m., 5 p.m., change that up for different people.
Okay.
Add more elevators.
Add more elevators, okay. That's the most common answer, I think. Trick question, you don't actually need a solution, you need questions. Because depending on who we're talking about and depending on what their experience is, it will affect the solution you come up with. So the common mistake is jumping to solutions like speed up the elevators, add an initial elevator, and make a better elevator schedule. Interestingly, the exact things I just heard, which is kind of fun. Because all of this assumes that it is actually the user's problem. Let's assume it's the landowner's problem. So what would be new ways to solve the problem if it's the landowner's problem, right? So let's think about this for a few minutes. Feel free to shout out or raise your hand. But from the landowner's perspective, right? People are hearing that this elevator is super, super slow. And so how could the landowner potentially solve this problem?
Move the funds.
What was that?
Move the funds. Like, don't all spend your money on renting or marketing. Try to improve the building itself.
There you go. That's a great idea. Anybody else? Any other ideas?
Turn it into a network lounge. Go slow-mo. Elevator.
Network lounge, okay. You can make the elevators nicer. That's certainly one thing you could do.
Ask the landowner why it's only finance people into his building.
Ask the landowner why only finance people want to use the building. That's interesting. So for example, if all of a sudden it became a combination of living and workspace, so that you also have people using the elevators in a more distributed schedule across different hours, that could be a better utilization of the land potentially. So you see a bunch more opportunities and a bunch more possibilities open up when we start by asking questions, right? And trying to understand the perspective of the people that we're talking to, right? So what is a problem fundamentally? It's the difference between things as desired and things as perceived. Now, one reason the person in the middle row there mentioned adding a mirror is because that's one of the common solutions to this. This is kind of a classic design problem. That's one of the common solutions, right? If it's difficult to affect the elevator speed, because that's installing a new elevator, it's very, very expensive. If you add a mirror, you immediately reduce people's boredom. Because if you're talking to the people using the elevator, and you're asking them what is their problem, if you just say what the problem is, the what is the elevator is too slow. That means there's one solution, make the elevator faster. But the real problem they're experiencing, the why behind it, is a little bit different. They're bored, they're waiting, 3 elevators are going by, and they're like, I want to be downstairs. And if you throw something up that's interesting, that might also solve their problem. Who here has been to a WeWork that's seen like one of those HD TVs outside the elevators that has like a rotating carousel of like people you can meet and deals you can do and all of that, or been to an office building like that? That's why, because there's multiple possible solutions that you can come up with depending on the type of research that you're doing. So before solutions, you have to figure out what is the fundamental truth? What is the problem that's being experienced? Whose problem is it? What are the specifics of the problem? What's the impact of the problem? Where is the problem from? And is it your responsibility to solve the problem? So previous talk that I gave today was a lot of talking, but today is going to be a lot more working together. And so we've actually made something for you that's this framework that you can use for figuring out if you've found the right problem. It's adapted from a book called Are Your Lights On? And if you go to this link up here, airfoil.link/CB1, it's going to open up a Google Sheet in your browser. So let me just show you how to use it real quick. So I'm going to have to exit out here and open it up. So when you open the file, you're going to see it pop up here. Actually, okay. I've got to pull it up on my screen there. Okay, you're going to see it pop up. And then you see it where it says down here, template, duplicate me. So go right here and press duplicate. Exactly, and then you can start editing in there. So we've locked this one, but then you can just add it in. Name it something so that we can find it if I want to put stuff on the screen, and then we can talk through it together. So let me just talk through the framework quickly. What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem really? Whose problem is it? Where is the problem from? And do you really want to solve it? So as you're thinking about your ideas in the hackathon, I would love for you to take a problem that you're already interested in solving and start to use this framework right now. We're going to go for the next 10 minutes, start to jot stuff down. While we're going with that, I'm going to maybe step through a little bit more of an explanation of each of what these questions means. Yes, so it's Airfoil. let me just pull this back up on the screen.
/CB1.
Yes. There we go, airfoil.link/CB1. Yeah. So let's step through them together. We can start jotting down ideas. So what is the problem, right? First thoughts. So in the elevator example, and actually I can bring an example of this here, right? This is just this is just a sample kind of filled out version of this. What's the problem? First thoughts. I don't like the chairs here. Yeah, sorry about that. Airfoil.link/CB1. I'm going to leave this up until, let me know when everybody has this up successfully, and then I'll cross to the next slide. Does anybody need more time?
You said to duplicate, which...
You go to the sheet at the bottom. Yeah. Would someone be able to help the gentleman back there? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna cross the example real quick. So, what's the problem? I don't like the chairs here. What's the problem? When I'm uncomfortable, I can't focus as easily. The chair doesn't have armrests, etc. So when you go from that top level complaint and try to drill down a little bit more, you start to get a bunch of specifics. Now, the important thing is that when I get that information, I don't necessarily know if everyone agrees with that, right? I don't necessarily know that armrests are what's important to everyone in this room, but I'm starting to gather data. I'm starting to get to something, right? So what's the problem really? What's the problem kind of behind that? I'm stressed because I want to be as optimized as possible to win. I can't lean to the side when I show my laptop to my friend. Okay, so because the chair doesn't have armrest is a fact. It's not a problem. But normally when you ask people, what's the problem you're experiencing, they will jump to a solution. I want armrests. You just say, but why do you want armrests? Because my arms get tired. Well, why are arms getting tired? Well, because I'm, in sitting down for 40 minutes at one time, right? And then from there's some more things we can drill into. Whose problem is it? My problem, I'm the user, my friend, she can't properly co-work with me. And importantly, you gotta document this stuff because one thing we do a lot of times in design is we try to figure out the personas of our users. And we want to make sure, for example, that we don't get all of our user research from one particular persona, because that's going to bias every decision that we make from there on afterwards. So it's a good way of checking ourselves. If you start to see my problem all over again, it's like I should probably go out and do some more research. And if I see only one type of persona represented there, or two or even three, then that may tell me that either my problem isn't very widespread, that's one possibility, or that that I need to do more broad research. Where is the problem from? Put it in context. There's a ton of coding I need to do by today. The shape of the table is super weird. That's also really helpful because sometimes people point to one thing as being the issue when there's an entirely separate thing that may be the issue. Maybe it's that people in the back are getting bored, right? It's like, well, okay, so why might that exist? And we might end up with something that's like the core problem is that we're not engaging everyone in a fair and even way, right? So we can go in different directions. Do you really want to solve it? Is it your responsibility? Yes, I'll find a better room and refine the scope. Now maybe I'll switch to the other side of the table, right? So that's the general framework. And so the idea is you can start with top level, what's the problem, and just basically keep pushing and pushing and pushing until you fill all of this up for every particular user research thing that you do. So I know that we've got limited time, and so it's hard for me to do this right now because we can't go out and do user research with our ideas. But I'm wondering if in the time that I've been explaining this, if somebody has been able to fill this out with a problem that they're currently validating and might be able to share with us kind of what they've come up with. Does anybody feel comfortable doing that? You in the middle there?
I just came up with a question I'm thinking about. So as a person looking for a month-to-month apartment or house or room.
And real quick, can you help guide me here to kind of how to find your sheet down here?
Oh yeah, I think it's the second tab. It's called Digital Nomads Travel.
Digital Nomads Travel, great. I'm gonna update that. Okay, what's the problem? First thoughts, as a digital nomad, I wanna find a month-to-month apartment, house, room to rent, but Airbnb and VRBO is too expensive, their fees is too high. I actually really love that this is a good example here because when we think about problem statements, they typically look like that. And to be honest, that's a good one, right? If I was seeing somebody pitch a startup and that was their problem statement. Digital nomads want to find a month-to-month apartment house room, but Airbnb is too expensive. That's a great problem statement to lead with. It's actually not quite the problem statement we want for the purposes of designing a product, because it's making a few assumptions here, and we can dive deeper on it. So I wanted to emphasize that more because you're going to see people that put together resources talking about figure out your user's problem, cite problem statements like that. I think I did in my first talk, but that may not be the level of granularity you need to design a solution. There are kind of different definitions here to play around with. So let's talk about what's the problem, right? Let's get specific. Any ideas for how we could do that? Go ahead.
I'm assuming that it's a digital nomad, I guess. It could be anyone that's looking for a house. And then also the problem is very specific here, where I've identified like the fee is too expensive, but there's also a lot of other issues that you could like narrow down into, I guess.
Yep.
I feel like you can only be a digital nomad for so long because of this problem. Like it becomes an unsustainable lifestyle because it's like every month you have the same issue. I'm about to sign a lease because I had this like issue for 2.5 years. Because I'm just like, whoa, it's like really expensive, obviously, to do the Airbnb thing.
But you have to consider their Airbnb, they charge a lot for their phone.
Right. Okay, so what's the problem? I'm just saying kind of when digital nomads are seeking places to live, they struggle to afford options, or we can even say digital nomading. Actually, I'm going to do it this way. So what's the problem really? Digital nomading is too expensive. Mismatch between desired lifestyle and what you can afford. There we go. No typos, good. Whose problem is it? So in this case, it's your problem. I'm wondering if we can go into any more detail on the characteristics that represent this persona.
The persona?
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like I'm pretty flexible, so I'm like maybe looking for different places. Like I might not have one city in mind.
What industry do you work in? Tech.
Yeah.
So you can work remotely?
Yeah.
So we can say something like remote tech workers, and you probably have a good passport, I'm guessing US passport. Good passport, all important details. Next, where is the problem from? So that's putting it in context. So an example being I don't like the chairs here, there's a ton of coding I need to do by today. And so this is interfering with that. So where is that problem coming from, would you say?
What do you mean code?
So I guess why did this problem come to mind? What brought it about?
Like housing availability.
Sorry?
Housing availability.
Housing availability. Actually, I'll put it this way. What's the story behind why you experienced this problem?
I think it's like the internal reasons, right? Like wanting to live in a different city, wanting to explore.
Yep.
But I think those are internal reasons why like anybody might want to like move cities and try to say no.
So what was your personal reason that this resonated to you to the degree that you wanted to investigate it as part of this week?
I guess I've done it. I've tried to do it a lot, and it's kind of hard to. It's something that you have a reoccurring problem. Like she said, you have to keep looking for housing, and there are a lot of issues with like the solutions that are out there today.
And for the last one, do you really want to solve it? Is it your responsibility? I'm guessing yes, because it's a problem that you're personally experiencing, right? Yes, personal problem. Okay, so this is just running through it as just kind of an example exercise. There's some other refinements we could do to this over time, but this gives us a little bit more information to look at here. And the big and really important thing is when you repeat this over and over again for row 4, row 5, when you've done 20, 30, 40 interviews and you're noting all this down, all of a sudden you're going to see a bunch of cells that look very close to each other. Whether you're going to see similar personas showing up, which is important because that may guide who you end up building the product for. Whether that is that you see that it's a recurring problem versus not a recurring problem. Whether finding the commonalities is a great way to begin validating the degree to which also the idea you have to solve it may be true, right? So let's say, for example, that I do a ton of interviews on this problem set, and I, keep hearing that digital nomadic is too expensive, it's too expensive, it's too expensive, right? But let's say I end up getting a bunch of people saying, I want a digital nomad, but my passport is a Malaysian passport, or it's an Indian passport, or it's a Colombian passport. And the problem ends up not just being that it's expensive, but it's expensive because of visa fees. It's expensive because I can't easily buy plane tickets. I have to always buy return tickets. I can never buy one way because the countries I'm flying to want a single ticket in and out because they're not American, right? So you may start to see these problems emerge. And so you can imagine that there's a solution here that solves the problem of renting. But when we think about the core problem, it's I want to be able to live globally. I want to have a vibrant life. I want to be cultured. I want to understand the world. And I want to be able to work a good job. And what is standing in the way of that today is the fact that when I go on Airbnb, it tells me I have to pay $7 grand a month to go do a rental. I can't afford that. But there are a series of other problems too underneath that. And we want to jump to the one that's most applicable to us because we experience it. So the degree to which we care about it is pronounced. But there may be bigger problems to solve. And by going through this process, you start to identify and generate data behind, the more research you do, data behind the degree to which certain solutions may have value over others. Awesome. So let me cross back to the presentation. Really appreciate everybody going and filling this out, and I hope that this is helpful as we go. Next, let's talk about lies. So this is how you can unintentionally encourage others to lie when you're trying to collect data one way. There's a really great example of this that's often taught in design, and it's called the mom test, how you can unintentionally encourage others to lie. I think there was a book on this as well, so it's not a new concept. So I'm going to turn my speakers all the way up. We have a short little video to play for you, 3 minutes, that'll explain this in a little more detail.
We're told, don't ask your mum if your business idea is a good one. She'll just say yes, because she loves you, of course. The mum test is a set of simple rules for asking good questions that even your mum can't lie to you about. Let's have 2 conversations and see what we can learn. Mum, I've got a business idea. Can I tell you about it? Of course, dear. You like your iPad, right? Do you use it a lot? Yes. Okay. So would you ever buy an app which was like a cookbook for your iPad? And it only cost £20. That's cheaper than your hardbacks on the shelf. Well, and you can share recipes with your friends. And there's an iPhone app which is your shopping list. And videos of that celebrity chef you love. Yes, dear. That sounds amazing. £20 is fine. Will it have pictures of the recipes? Yes, definitely. Thanks, Mum. I'm going to quit my job and put all my savings into my new startup. Won't you have some lasagna? That conversation led us down the garden path. The mum test is about talking to your customers about their life, not your idea. It's about discussing specifics in the past instead of generics or opinions about the future. It's about talking less and listening more. Let's do it again right this time. Hey, Mum, how's the new iPad? Oh, I love it. I use it every day. What do you usually do on it? Oh, you know, read the news, play Sudoku, catch up with my friends. What's the last thing you did on it? Well, Dad and I are off on holiday. I was looking where to stay. Did you use an app for that? No, I just used Google. What app should I use? How did you find out about the other apps you have? The Sunday paper has a section on the apps of the week. Makes sense. By the way, I saw a couple of new cookbooks on the shelf. Where did those come from? Oh, they're one of those things you just end up getting at Christmas. I think Doreen gave me that one. Haven't even opened it. As if I need another lasagna recipe at my age. Time to refine my idea. We discovered many insights in that conversation to help us adjust our idea. It just goes to show, if you can get useful business information from Mum, you can get it from anyone. The Mum test.
I love this. I do recommend blinking while doing user research, but there's so many gems in that. You start to discover not just whether or not your idea is something that really has value, but you identify lots of other important information in the qualitative research around what channels were used to reach people, around how were they incentivized to use a product, in what goes through their head when they want to buy a product, right? If you're generating something that is, let's say, an online mental health care business, there are some people that will show up because they are interested in dealing with a specific issue in their lives. There are some people that may be involved in improving their lifestyle. There are some people that may be interested in doing something because someone else has told them to and said you need to seek some assistance on something, right? And understanding both what those motivations are and which personas they reflect is really important. In this example, right, a woman of, in this case, the mother, right, she found apps through the Sunday paper. But we don't know that every user will be that way. Some users may find it through App Store app of the day. Some users may find it through their contacts and connections. And it may even differ depending on the country that you're talking about. In China, there's an app called Pinduoduo that basically is like a group buying app. And it's very popular, right? The idea that you'll go with your friends and generate a shared shopping cart together and go and interact online with other people to comment and say, you know, hey, I'm interested in buying that. Oh, that'll look great on you, whatever. It's very common. But part of it is that online communication is frankly just more common there. In the US market, they did testing, and they actually, Pinduoduo just launched an app called Temu that did a Super Bowl ad that they're in the United States now. But it's totally different because they realized the group buying concept didn't make as much sense in the US. People did not prefer to interact with their close friend circle as much online over text form. There are differences in even country by country people's preferences. And so when you think then about how do you launch your product, there's all these variables that can impact the way it's seen. So I'm going to throw this on the screen a little bit longer this time, Airfoil.link/CB2. This is a toolkit for avoiding these lies. It basically takes the mom test and puts it in a spreadsheet together, so I would encourage you to bring it up. And we're going to take 5 to 6 minutes right now and fill it out. And while you're filling it out, I'm going to go and step through it in a little bit more detail. So first, who is the specific person you're speaking with? Age, interests, segment, I would say country, I might say level of technical literacy. That could be a very important thing in crypto. Have they used a crypto product before? Have they not used a crypto product before? You want to collect as much of that information as possible. Case in point, day one, right? I was going to suggest in my talk that a better way to onboard, the better way to get started buying crypto would probably be using something like MoonPay in your wallet, where you can just connect your credit card. But one of the people in the audience was a resident of New York. And in New York, MoonPay is banned. So you can't use that. You have to go on board with Coinbase or Gemini. You got to go through that process in order to start buying crypto. I used to live in New York. I completely forgot about that. So I was ready to recommend a solution that the person asking the question wouldn't have actually been able to use, right? So that information is super, super crucial. Second, the big 3 learning goals. What questions do you want answered through that interview, right? So, you know, it might be that you want to validate your customer segment. It might be that you want to validate the pain points. Going back to the previous examples, you know, the pain point is that renting when you travel is really, really expensive, right? If you're a digital nomad, well, maybe you do a lot of interviews and you find out that in some cities like San Francisco and New York, short-term rentals are really expensive because of local legislation that artificially inflates those prices, whereas in Lisbon, maybe it's not that expensive. And so it turns out that whether or not being digital nomad is quote unquote expensive to you has a lot to do with which countries specifically you're talking to. That may come out of this research. Hypotheses. What do you think they will say and why? It's helpful to put this down on paper and then not try to goad it out of them in the interview. Because then you get to look afterwards at this framework and you get to say, here's what I thought I would hear and here's what I did. It's a way to check yourself. If you keep seeing that the hypotheses aren't matching what you're hearing, that's a good piece of feedback. What it basically means is, I may have incorrect hypotheses here. I need to do a lot more research. If your hypotheses are coming true and you're very sure your questions are good, then it shows you're probably onto something. Specific requirements for passing the MOM test. Keep it casual. Don't ask for specifics. Don't ask leading questions in conversations and surveys. It can be very helpful to write down these questions in advance so that you can make sure that they're general. A lot of times when I do qualitative research, I don't necessarily do that because I like getting people to tell stories, and I've done it enough times that I kind of know how to do it and avoid leading questions. But I love doing things like, for example, saying when somebody expresses a pain point, saying like, why was that important to you to bring up to me? You seem pretty angry about it. Why do you feel that? And can you take me through an example of when you felt angry about it? Because then they start telling you a story and they start giving you info over here and here and here, tons of different examples. And in fact, examples that they may not have otherwise brought up. Because when you ask somebody a question, they filter through all the information in their brain to give you an answer that they think will directly answer what you're asking for, right? Though they're putting a filter on that answer, no matter what. Your job is to get them to forget the filter, take the filter off, and just spew out everything that comes to mind. And through that, then you can filter it to find the information and data that you need. Results. Get facts and commitments. I would say that in this case, right, it's, make sure that you have concrete information, make sure that you don't just have their feelings, make sure that you have, if you've asked them for that story, right, get all the details of that story down, right? And then changes to make, refine the idea and use it again if needed. If you see that in the interview somebody was uncomfortable, if you see that in the interview it felt like maybe you asked a few leading questions or maybe they gave you some answers, whenever you get an answer like, yeah, that means that probably the question wasn't very good. Whenever you get an answer that's actually much longer and much more in depth, that means the question could be very good. And there's actually a checklist here I want to share with you guys. These are some ways you may know that you are not getting truth, you are getting lies. First of all, you're talking more than them. That's maybe the easiest one to measure. The best interviewers have amazing questions, and then they sit in the back like this, and they're just jotting down notes, right? That's the best case as an interviewer. But if you keep, I think one pitfall that people fall into is they say, okay, I want to make sure I don't ask leading questions. So I'm going to jot down a bunch of questions at the very beginning, right? But now they've got like 30 questions and they've got 30 minutes. So what they do is they almost cut off the person they're talking to and they just want to move to the next one, want to move to the next one in almost a formulaic way. They end up talking more than them even if they're not asking leading questions. And so they get surface level answers, but they don't get deeper answers as a result. They don't get that open, unfiltered feedback. You're getting compliments, but no promises. Very important. If I'm trying to validate an idea, and after I'm done making sure that I don't ask leading questions, at the end I say, so if X existed, would you buy it today, right? And they're like, maybe. My next question is why or why not? If they don't get to yes, if they don't literally say I will do so, if like the app is ready right now, I will actually hand you $20 right now. If they don't say that, then that means you have to kind of say, I'm not sure that that's actually, true. If you told them your idea from the beginning, if they know what your idea is going in, yeah, no question, you're not getting the right answers. because they're going to either optimize to tell you you're right, or if they don't like your idea, they're going to optimize to tell you you're wrong, and they're not going to tell you anything that would support what you're building. You got an unexpected answer and didn't reflect. That's kind of what I was saying before. You've got your formula of 30 questions, and you kind of just go through. You're not sure which big question you're answering. That's an important one. We think about kind of the big three from before. You're asking for hypotheticals instead of specific past stories and facts. This is a really important one. If you're ever asking the question, so, like, maybe at the very end, if you're trying to just do some final validation, you can do this. But if you're at the beginning of an interview and you're saying, so if X existed, it's difficult for them to visualize it, right? If I'm doing prototyping and I have an actual prototype in front of somebody, I can show it to them, I can have them interact with it, and then they can tell me if they would use it. But if I'm explaining a theory to them, and I'm trying to validate a problem, then there's nothing they can directly interact with. That answer of hypothetically whether or not they'll use it or not is not that valuable to me. Because it's so hard for them to visualize it that they won't be able to give me a truthful answer. So I'm going to cross back real quick and ask if we've got one person that wants to share this framework. I'm going to type it in there. Let me see. Airfoil.link/CB2. Okay, is there anybody who's down for me to bring this up right now? Anyone? Anybody? Yes. Jordan. Great. Okay. Specific person to speak with, 30, crypto and tech, big 3 learning goals, how they connect with new people, how they stay in touch with people, how they know the context and information about the person they're in touch with. Can you give me a little bit of context on like the problem space that you're trying to explore?
Yeah, so the problem space is the idea of when you meet somebody new, how do you stay in touch with that person, and how do you make sure that you're like let's say I met you today, do I add you on Telegram, and then 3 weeks from now, a month from now, how do you know who I am when I message you on Telegram?
Yes, right? That's a super common problem. That's why we're all doing selfies now when we do Telegram intros. So if you talk to a 30-year-old person in crypto and tech, what do you think they'll say and why?
For each of those questions?
Yep.
Sure. So for the first one, how they connect with people, I think it would be when I'm meeting somebody new, I ask them if they have a Telegram or Instagram or whatever kind of generic messaging app that is, probably one of those type ones. And then they'll say I add them on that, and I send them a message, take a selfie, or just send them a message with some context.
Okay. And how they stay in touch with people?
Would be if they have something in common with that person, that they try to like message them about that thing or ask them questions about it or share that with them, or they follow their feed if it's something like Instagram.
They follow their feed, got it. And how do they know the context and information about the person they're in touch with?
If it's something like Instagram, they follow the feed and they look back at their old posts the person has made publicly, or what they remember talking to them about. Hopefully.
Okay. Specific requirements for passing the mom test. So on this, let's basically say that you don't want to suggest a solution, and want to understand how people stay in touch with specifics, let's say, and let's say validate, understand how big a pain point this is for them. And the result that we want from them, facts and commitments, we want to, what was that?
What mediums they're using frequently when trying to stay connected.
What mediums they're using, awesome. Any other ideas?
If they're satisfied with the way they currently connect with people.
If they're satisfied with the current way. Let's also say how often this poses a problem for them. Because I'm in crypto, this is a problem for me basically every week. But is it a problem for my family? No. Because they don't connect with nearly as many people as I do.
What are some information or context you'd like to have remembered that you weren't able to remember when trying to reconnect?
So remembering context.
Like how did you, yeah.
How they remember context. And we can also say why remembering context is important. Or, might be important. So an example that I would give personally is I run a business. I meet a lot of people for work. It is important for me to remember context and do follow-ups because I need to understand whether or not this is a lead that I need to follow up with or not. I need to understand if this person may be going to another conference in the future that I'm going to, right? That's my specific need. And the question is, of course, are those commonalities across more people? Which, again, is the more research you do, you log my answer, you log his answer, her answer, all of our answers, and you start to see, is that Phil's problem? Is that the reason that Phil would want this, or is that the reason that everyone would, right? So I know we're kind of getting through this real quick, and there's a lot more depth here to cover. But finally, I want to cover ruin. So this is really just a summary of everything we've learned so far. What we call ruin is when you don't understand the problem or when you inadvertently uncover lies instead of truth. This is often an issue that I see in the crypto industry. I've said on day one that sometimes we live in our own bubble where people are experiencing problems and we don't understand that they're not the problems experienced by the rest of the population, right? Or that they are population specific. Day one, we talked a little bit about the degree to which people care about self-sovereignty of their own data and the degree to which people care about being able to secure their own data on a blockchain. The set of problems experienced by somebody in Colombia is very different than the set of problems experienced by somebody in the United States. And if we listen to only one group of people, we will come up with only one set of solutions. If we think about the history of how we've taught both design thinking and entrepreneurship education, there's always been a pendulum swing. Long time ago, everybody learned this stuff by learning how to make business plans. And business plans start with a lot of assumptions. You go in saying, this is the business I'm going to build in 5 years, and I now need investors to go fund me to do it. You give me money, I will build a product and put it there. Eventually we realized that was flawed because it meant that we had to make tons of assumptions on day one before we'd actually done the design thinking process. So we flipped over to design thinking in the lean startup methodology, which was more about talk to users, hear their problems, and then use that information to generate products. Well, eventually people realized that the problem there was oftentimes when you're building solutions that aren't relevant to your own life, you don't get deep enough research and insights from the people you're interviewing, and then honestly your performance goes lower. So YC switched that again to say, solve problems that you want to solve problems that you personally experience, forget about that design thinking process, throw it out, do that. But what that results in is a bunch of products that only work in Silicon Valley. And that's why you see a startup get valuation, goes like this, goes like this, goes like this, goes crazy high, and then craters. Because turns out they built for San Francisco and they didn't build for the remainder of the population. They didn't build for the world. They didn't find the right group of people. So maybe the last thing that I'll say here is that immersion is also really important. Immersion, it's not just about sitting down in a user interview and getting this stuff in a structured environment, but I would even say that as you're building your product, find the people who want to use it and be as close to them as you can. Talk to them on as frequent a basis as you can. One thing that I love that we can do in crypto that's harder to do outside, so I'm used to this very structured qualitative and quantitative research process as a designer working in Web 2 companies. Working in Web 3, all of a sudden, I remember when, I forget which client it was either Utopia or Layer 3, that said, hey, so you've come up with a design prototype, great, can we drop it in the Discord? I was like, sure, I guess we can. But that's not structured, but I haven't carefully put together my testing group. And they're like, yeah, but let's see what they say. And turns out the Discord was pretty representative of that particular early adopter, early majority group of people. I got some quick feedback, and I started getting more used to throwing stuff out into communities and getting feedback. Now you gotta make sure you continue to follow the processes we just talked about, because otherwise that early adopter group is gonna dominate your understanding of the user's problem, and then you're gonna build something way too focused for them. But it's still okay to throw stuff out and see what people say, right? As long as you're anchoring your feedback on the right processes to avoid inadvertently falling victim to your biases, you can collect data in a much more open and free way. And even better, you can do things like build products with tokens that allow people to vote on the features they want, giving them a direct say in what happens next. And we can use a really, really cool toolkit here. So to close off, there's 3 things we talked about today. Understand the problem, check your assumptions. We've got 2 frameworks here that can hopefully help you do that. And third, just keep building. When you run into roadblocks, when your product didn't work the way you thought it would, or when you did a lot of research and then you built the product and then something didn't go right and you're not seeing the numbers and metrics you want, then you can come back to the frameworks we've laid out, but at the same time, don't lose faith that you can get there. Some of the best products have gone through crazy iterations, and who here in this room knows Notion or uses Notion? Many of you? So Notion almost died as a company. It was a group of, I think, 6 or 7 guys at the time. It's led by a really terrific designer, which is the reason for their visual language. And they'd raised some money and they were running out of it. They moved the whole team to Osaka, Japan in one house and just hacked on a new version of it that was a lot more like a text editor and less like a database application, kind of as a Hail Mary. And now they have a multi-billion-dollar company. But they were almost worth 0 because they kept pushing and they kept challenging their own assumptions. They kept trying new things. Sometimes inspiration takes a long time to strike. Follow these formats. It'll help you structure the process, but also don't lose faith if it takes a few tries. Thanks, guys.